My name is Kelly Selden. I'm on the Ember-cli core team. This is just a little talk about a newer way to update your Ember apps. So I just moved here from Seattle, and I've been at CrowdStrike for like a month now. Chris and I are new hires over there. It's a cybersecurity company with an all Ember front end. We're hiring any skill level, even junior. Open source friendly. I'm able to work on this talk there and help out with ember-cli things. And I have a bunch of stickers I forgot to set out, but I will if you are interested. And come chat with me if any of this sounds interesting. So I'll just go into a little bit of history of what it was like to update Ember apps, what people are probably still doing, and then a demo and deep dive of the new thing that I built. The legacy or current way is ember-init. Does anyone use this as their main way to update their app? Show of hands. Oh, there we go. So yeah, this is from the get-go of ember-cli. This is how you would do it, how the docs would say to do it as well. Resets all your files to a brand new state. So then you'd have to go through all of your files and go undo what it did, but try and keep the new bits. And also, it wouldn't remove any new existing files that were removed. So you could go see some projects on GitHub or your company app. You still got that Brock file in there, your Bower file, if you're not using Bower anymore, etc. They're all still there usually, I've seen. Then these came out, the ember-new-output and ember-addon-output repos on GitHub. It's something that I started like years ago. It goes back all the way to ember-cli 0041. And just as an experiment, I tried installing that version and running it, and it wouldn't even install on npm. It's just dead. So these were better. They gave you the actual changes, just the changes you wanted between versions, but it was still a manual process. You had to go into the URL and tweak the compare URL, and then just go use this as a reference to go update your app so you can make mistakes, and it was just tedious. So then I wrote ember-cli-update. This came out of my frustration of maintaining about 20 or 30 add-ons on GitHub, and I'm a compulsive updater, so every ember-cli update I'd carve out a weekend, start going through all the update processes. So I just created this to do most of the work for me, and then everyone else benefits too. You get these automated updates, the conflict resolution. It's not just a blast of files. It actually knows Git and makes conflicted files for you if there are conflicts. And then a little bonus is it'll run all the code mods you need as well. And more, but not too much more. Just a few more options. So that's about it. That's essentially the API. 2 commands. The first one, just as a executable ember-cli-update, update you to the most recent version. And the second one is the code mod runner. And the reason why these can't be a single command is because the first command will potentially give you lots of JavaScript conflicts. And code mods won't like that because it's trying to parse the AST. So it just cannot be one command, unfortunately. It would have to assume that you have no conflicts in your update, which is impossible most of the time. So these are the various ways to install and run. Just npm's giving you all these new ways to do it, so I thought I'd list them all out. The top one is usually the one I do. So you just npm install or yarn install as a global, and then you can run it. It's in your path. The second one I added as convenience for people that usually like add-ons. I don't currently run it like this, but when I get bug reports, it's a lot of people saying Ember update as an add-on. So you can install it as an add-on and it'll run, but kind of weird to have it locked as a version as you're updating ember-cli. So it's changing the package JSON as you're a version in there. It's a little strange. I guess I wouldn't recommend it, but it's there and there's no foreseeable future to remove it. And then the last one is just have npx do the work for you. So my question is, how many people are familiar with npx? Use it? Okay, not that too many. So what it does, it came out in around npm 5, early npm 5, as just another way to run stuff. And so anything on npm registry with that name, it'll just go download the most recent version and run it for you in one command. It's convenient, but it's slower. So if you're on the network, it won't run. I mean, if you're off the network, it won't run. But it's very convenient for, you know, documentation. For instance, you don't have to assume people did the npm install first to get the most recent version. It's just they're always running the most recent. Okay, so fake live demo, and the reason it has to be fake is because I'm not even on the network right now. This does lots of network traffic. It does command REST requests, npm requests everywhere. It's just the nature of it, of how I decided to design it. I guess it gets most recent everything. So I'm just, you'll see that it's just a lot of, this is what would have happened. So this is just my Git GUI, and it shows you an example of what will happen when you update a sufficiently complicated app. So you'll see that it gave you conflicted files when it couldn't figure out what to do. So I guess I'll explain a little bit what's happening here. So it detects your local version running that you have in your package, JSON. And then it goes out to NPM to get the latest version of ember-cli. And then it clones the output repos that I mentioned earlier in your system temp. And then it generates a git patch based on those two tags that it determined. And then it applies the patch to your repo. And that was very difficult, actually. So there's a entirely different NPM repository that I created that is that I depend on in ember-cli update. It's called git diff apply. Because a foreign repo as a patch to your current and not as like a remote is, you can't even do it in Git. I had to jump through some hoops. So it's its own repo. It doesn't even know what Ember is. It just applies git patch to a foreign repo. And so what you get from this is only changes the code that needs to update, instead of blowing away all the files and making you do the work. So it's a small change set. Unfortunately, you have to be online to do the update, just because it needs to go get the most recent things. And it's aware of Git conflicts. Here's just a little example of what you might see. So this is your README. Ember-cli made some tweaks to the documentation, but as you see up there, it didn't touch my filled out README section. It just left it alone. And here's an example of a conflict, just a normal Git conflict, but in my ESLint, I had my own extends, and Ember changed what it wanted to do in extends for a default app. And so it's up to me to decide what I want to do in that case. And that's why you can't run code mods necessarily. You'll have some of these in your files. And then this is a little bit of a deep dive of the API, but not too much. It's pretty simple. You have from and to. Normally they're auto-calculated, but you can override them. And in cases where from is useful is, say you had something like Greenkeeper or someone that was just ticking the version of ember-cli and not touching any of the other files. So your ember-cli version, your project, is not quite what it expects as far as other files like your ESLint files or some of the tests. So you can override the from to a previous version of when you last synced up with all the blueprints, if that makes sense. To is useful if you want to update in pieces, which I do for complex apps. All in one is possible, but when you get test failures, yeah, where'd they come from? I don't know. So you can pin it to minor versions. It understands semver, so you can just say 3.0, and it'll give you 3.0.4 or whatever is recent. You can just give it semver ranges. It's also the to is also useful if you know your app is broken in the most recent and you just want to go to the most recent previous one, maybe it'll do that for you. It can run through merge conflicts with you. If you put in resolve conflicts, it'll just run your system git merge tool. So if you have a GUI set up, or if it's Vim or something, it'll just pop it up in sequence for you to resolve them. So reset is essentially ember-init in this new API. So it'll just reset it to factory standards for you if you want, just to see if you miss something. Sometimes it's useful. Dry run will just give you console log of what it would have done from this version to this version. And compare only is a little convenience to open up the repos, the output repos. So you run that, and it'll just open up your system default browser with the tags filled in for you for the output repos to just give you a visual of what changed without touching your app. And so if you've gotten this far, now is the time before you start with the code mods is to resolve any of your conflicts, of course, and then run your test suite. Don't start on the code mods if you have broken tests at this point. And then you would commit. And then you get to the code mod section. That's sample output. If you did dry run, it would say, hey, I'm going to run these. And then down here is what is just standard. It'll stage files once it's done, but it'll update files like that. Just a simple example, if anyone's run the new testing code mods, this is what, it ran a few code mods over this, so it's not just one. So you have a new testing goodness for a newer Ember version. So the run code mods option, this also is very network heavy on purpose. It's kind of an experiment of mine. It uses a manifest that we store on GitHub rather than locked dependencies. And what it does when it gets this manifest is I have command lists for code mods. You know, you just find a code mod on GitHub. It says run this. It's usually a JS code shift. Run this command and you'll get a code mod to run. So I just throw these in this manifest. And when I download it, ember-cli-update, I bundle npx and I just run it. Run the commands in sequence. And so it's all network, all latest codes. So down to the pros, all latest code mod fixes, and which means I can also add new ones to this manifest, and no one needs to update ember-cli-update because it's always, every run it downloads the new manifest. It's pretty convenient. I don't have to run my test suite or publish a new version on npm. It's just everyone's, even if they're ember-cli-update, you know, like few versions back, 0.17, that might be a few months old right now, I can throw a new code mod in that manifest and they'll get it. They don't have to worry about updating. Cons are you're not protected against bugs in the code mods. This is back to, when it's kind of going in reverse. We had lock files to fix this, and now we're going in reverse a little bit. You know, if this turns out to be a bad idea, you know, you can always revert it and have all of these code mods as dependencies in ember-cli-update, and then every time they tweak it and make a bug fix, I'd have to release a new version of, or semver or something like that. Everyone would have to reinstall. It would be, I don't know if it'd be worth it, so I'm kind of liking this at the time, currently. It's also reliant on internet as well, so npx has to download JS Code Shift and download some of these code mods. This option, list code mods, it'll just give you, it'll show you what the manifest is. And you can see there's some meta in there to determine what to apply it to. So this ember-cli-update runs against add-ons, Ember apps, Glimmer apps. It can run against engines, but I haven't done that yet. You'd have to make your own output repo because it's entirely driven by these output repos. But this code mod runner, it uses these meta tags to determine if it should run against your version. So if you're in the middle of there, let's say you're doing an Ember 3.0 update, you only get a couple of those. Or if you're still on node 4, some of those won't run. And so once you get into this point, you're almost done. Now you go back to your test suite, you fix any of those that the code mods might have malformed, and then you commit. So to help in the process, so I would say that this is pretty much the new standard way, the official way to update your Ember apps. It's missing in some places of documentation currently, but I wrote this power user guide in the README to help facilitate the adoption, I guess you would say. And you can go check it out, it's very nice, but I'll just go over it really quick. I recommend to do a complete upgrade, you would run code mods first instead of doing an update because of the manifest system. They could bug fix their code mods. We could add a new one. And so if you, sometimes when you run code mods first, you might get some changes that you want before you update. And then you can update minor versions, which I recommended earlier, just to be safer. It might take longer, but if you have a large app, I would kind of recommend that. And then once you've updated, run your code mods again, because you might fall into a new category of one that should run for your version, and then repeat until you're done. And so Power User Guide, I would say for your, your corporate app that has 20 people using it, that's what I recommend for the massive ones. And so this is the URL. Go check it out. Submit bug reports. Have fun. Thank you.